All right, so get this picture, a garage,
Mm-hmm.
but not just any garage.
Okay.
We're talking desks cobbled together from old doors, the sound of dial-up internet echoing, and in the midst of it all, a guy named Jeff Bezos laying the groundwork for what would become Amazon.
Wow.
We're diving into the everything store today
Okay.
to uncover the unexpected beginnings of this behemoth alongside the man who willed it into existence.
And it's truly a wild ride.
Yeah.
Author Brad Stone got his hands on some incredible stories thanks to interviews with those who were there at the very start.
It wasn't all smooth sailing, though, was it?
Right.
I mean, we've all heard the phrase Bezos' vision, but what did that actually look like in practice?
Well, imagine being a fly on the wall in those early days.
Okay.
Bezos, fresh off Wall Street, talking about building a bookstore with unlimited selection.
Hmm.
Keep in mind, this is the early 90s.
Right.
Most people were still figuring out how to send an email.
Talk about ahead of the curve. But to convince people to bet on this wild vision of online book selling, that couldn't have been easy.
Not at all.
Yeah.
In fact, Bezos was upfront with his own parents,
Mm-hmm.
telling them there was a good chance they'd lose every penny they invested.
Wow.
That's a bold statement, even for someone with Bezos' track record.
That's some serious confidence,
Yeah.
even bordering on crazy. But it seems like that unwavering self-belief was part of the recipe for Amazon's success. But let's rewind a bit.
Yep.
Before Amazon was even a glimmer in Bezos' eye, there were signs of the relentless drive that would come to define him.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Even as a kid, Bezos had this analytical mind.
Really?
Stone talks about how young Jeff created a whole system to evaluate his mom's writing. She was working on a book at the time.
Oh, wow.
A tiny editor in the making.
That's amazing. But you know what's even more amazing?
What's that?
This wasn't just a one-off thing.
Right.
Bezos had this drive to understand, to analyze even back then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He even developed a whole survey for his classmates to rate their teachers.
Oh, my gosh.
Equal parts impressive. And, well, let's just say those teachers probably knew they had a future titan on their hands.
I can only imagine those staff meetings.
Yeah.
But there's another layer to Bezos' story that I found particularly striking.
Okay.
Stone reveals that Bezos' biological father had absolutely no idea who his son became.
It's a detail that adds a whole new dimension to the narrative, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder about the impact of family, or even the lack thereof, on someone's ambition. But back to those scrappy early days.
Okay.
Stone doesn't sugarcoat the realities of building a company from the ground up.
Right.
Their first office was this tiny, windowless room, a former band practice space.
Can you imagine?
Wow.
From Sonic Jungle to the Everything Store. But even in that cramped space, Bezos was laser-focused on his grand vision.
Yeah.
He was already conducting those infamously intense interviews, searching for the best and brightest minds to join him.
Oh, you have to tell the story of the gas station interview question.
Oh, yeah.
It's classic Bezos.
Right.
Yeah.
He'd ask candidates these seemingly impossible questions like, how many gas stations are there in the United States?
Oh, gosh.
It wasn't about getting the right answer, but rather seeing how they tackle a problem with such a massive scope.
It speaks to that data-driven approach that would become synonymous with Amazon.
Right.
They were analyzing everything from day one.
Exactly.
Wow.
And speaking of analyzing, remember that story about the lichen book?
Oh, yeah.
It's a perfect example of the lengths Bezos was willing to go to exploit even the smallest advantage.
Okay, so for those who haven't heard the story, lay it on us.
Okay.
What's the deal with the lichen loophole?
Back then, book distributors had this rule that retailers had to order a minimum of 10 books at a time.
Okay.
Amazon wasn't selling enough yet to meet that minimum for every order.
Right.
So Bezos got creative.
Okay.
They figured out that the distributor system only tracked orders, not actual deliveries.
Okay, I can already see where this is going.
So Bezos would order the one book he actually needed, plus 9 copies of some obscure out-of-stock book about lichens.
Oh, wow.
The distributor system was happy, and Amazon avoided those hefty minimum order fees.
You know, that story really highlights something key about Amazon's early strategy.
What's that?
They were willing to exploit any loophole, bend any rule to gain an edge. It's that relentless hustle that helped them survive when so many others failed.
Right.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Right.
Remember, this is the dot-com boom and bust era we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Amazon was not immune to the fallout.
Right.
In fact, a lot of people, even seasoned analysts, thought they were done for.
Really?
There's a story in the book about Safra Katz.
Okay.
She was a big-time Wall Street analyst at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and she was utterly convinced Amazon wouldn't survive.
That's wild. What changed her mind?
Well,
Or did she just have to eat her words later on?
let's just say the trajectory of Amazon surprised a lot of people,
Right.
cats included.
Yeah.
But you're right, the dot-com bubble bursting was a turning point.
Yeah.
It forced Bezos to make some tough decisions.
Right.
Amazon adopted a new mantra, get our house in order,
Okay.
a far cry from the growth at all costs mentality of the late 90s.
Had to hurt, especially for someone as ambitious as Bezos.
Right.
I mean, we've touched on his intensity, but Stone really paints a picture of an almost pressure cooker environment in the early days.
Intense is putting it mildly.
Yeah.
There's this one anecdote about Andy Jassy,
Okay.
who you might know as the CEO of AWS now, but back then he was a new recruit.
Right.
During a company broomball game, he accidentally whacked Bezos in the head with a paddle.
Ouch. Talk about a memorable first impression.
Right.
Yeah.
Thankfully, Jassy survived Bezos' wrath, and the incident became part of Amazon lore.
Wow.
But it gives you a sense of the culture, that all-in mentality.
And then there were Bezos's legendary nutters, as they were called.
Right.
You know, those explosive outbursts that people still talk about today? Yeah.
What's fascinating to me is that, according to Stone, Bezos was usually right, even if his delivery was.
Well, less than ideal.
It's true.
Yeah.
Bezos had this almost uncanny ability to pinpoint flaws, to predict problems before they even arose.
Wow.
But that sharp insight often manifested as, shall we say, constructive criticism on overdrive.
Right.
It shaped Amazon's culture, though, making it incredibly data-driven and results-oriented.
So after surviving the dot-com bubble burst, tightening their belts, what's the next chapter in Amazon's quest to become the everything store?
This is where a meeting with a retail giant almost changed the course of history.
Okay.
Stone talks about how Bezos met with Walmart's leadership,
Mm-hmm.
exploring a potential partnership.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if those two behemoths had joined forces back then?
Right.
Talk about a retail apocalypse for everyone else.
It's tantalizing what if, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately it wasn't meant to be.
Right.
However, Bezos did learn a valuable lesson from another retail giant around that time,
Uh-huh.
Costco. He had this pivotal meeting with James Sinegal, Costco's founder.
Okay, this I gotta hear.
Yeah.
What wisdom did the king of bulk buying impart? Did they compare notes on hot dog strategies?
Funny you should mention that
Yeah.
Sinegal emphasized the importance of customer loyalty.
Okay.
He explained how Costco's model, with its limited selection but incredibly low prices, was all about creating a devoted customer base.
Ah, the Costco effect.
Yeah.
Once you're in, you're hooked for life.
Right.
But how did that influence Bezos?
It planted the seed for Amazon Prime.
Okay.
Bezos saw how that focus on customer value, on giving them something truly special, could create a powerful, long-lasting bond.
Prime was a huge gamble, though, wasn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, the idea of paying for shipping up front.
Right.
It's just not how people were used to shopping online back then.
Exactly.
Right.
It was a huge risk, but it's also a stroke of genius.
Yeah.
And it speaks to Bezos' willingness to bet big on his vision, even when others were skeptical. But even as he was revolutionizing online shopping, Bezos never let go of a childhood dream,
Yeah.
space exploration.
And that's how Blue Origin was born, right?
Exactly.
This whole other side to Bezos' ambition, reaching for the stars while conquering the retail world, it's like something out of a sci-fi novel.
It really is.
Wow.
And while Bezos was busy building rockets in secret, he was also pushing Amazon into uncharted territory here on Earth.
Okay.
Remember Mechanical Turk?
Oh, yeah, Mechanical Turk.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that always stuck with me because it's so weird.
Ready?
Explain it for those who don't know, because even I'm not sure I fully get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, Mechanical Turk is a platform where businesses can pay people to complete small, simple tasks that computers struggle with.
Okay.
Things like labeling images, transcribing audio, or identifying patterns.
So it's like crowdsourcing on steroids.
Exactly.
Wow.
Bezos was fascinated by the idea of harnessing human intelligence on a massive scale long before crowdsourcing became a buzzword.
It's like he's always thinking 10 steps ahead.
Right.
But speaking of thinking ahead, we can't forget about what might be Amazon's most impactful innovation yet. Amazon Web Services, or AWS, for those in the know.
AWS is a perfect example of Bezos' institutional no philosophy.
Okay.
He knew that even the best companies could get stuck in their ways, so he actively encouraged his team to push boundaries and challenge assumptions.
So, what started as an internal project to manage Amazon's own massive infrastructure became this whole other behemoth powering a huge chunk of the internet as we know it.
Exactly.
Were people inside Amazon even on board with it at first? It
Yeah.
seems like such a departure from their core business.
It was definitely a gamble, and not everyone was convinced.
Right.
But Bezos saw the potential of cloud computing before most,
Yeah.
and he was willing to invest heavily in it, even when it meant operating at a loss for years.
That's a recurring theme with Bezos, isn't it?
Right.
That long game, that willingness to play the long game even when it seems crazy to everyone else. But it's not just about technology and infrastructure, is it?
Right.
Let's talk about the Kindle,
Okay.
the device that basically put an entire industry on notice.
The Kindle is a fascinating story because it wasn't just about creating a new device. It was about reimagining the entire reading experience.
Okay.
And it was a surprisingly long time in the making.
Years, really. I just assumed Bezos saw the iPod and thought, we need one of those, but for books.
It wasn't quite that simple.
Okay.
Bezos was obsessed with creating a reading experience that was actually better than a physical book.
Yeah.
And that took time, a lot of trial and error, and some very secretive R&D in their Lab 126 division.
Speaking of Lab 126, they were also working on other secret projects, right? Didn't the Fire Phone come out of there?
It did, and while the Fire Phone wasn't exactly a success story,
To put it mildly.
it does highlight Amazon's willingness to experiment, to push into new markets, even if it means stumbling along the way.
Okay, so we've got Amazon becoming this unstoppable force in e-commerce, cloud computing, and even digital reading. But it's not just organic growth, right?
Right.
They've made some pretty significant acquisitions along the way. And I'm not just talking about those 9 copies of Lycan, a comprehensive guide.
Right. We had to talk about Zappos.
Okay.
That was a major turning point.
Zappos was a big deal.
It was.
They had this amazing company culture of fanatical devotion to customer service.
Right.
It seemed like the antithesis of Amazon in a lot of ways.
It was, and that's what made the acquisition so fascinating.
Right.
Donizayi Zappos's CEO was initially resistant to the idea of being swallowed up by the Amazon machine.
Yeah.
But Bezos, ever the strategist, saw the value in Zappos's brand and their expertise in apparel and footwear,
Yeah.
a market Amazon wanted to dominate.
And we all know how that turned out.
Oh.
Zappos is part of the empire now.
Exactly.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing in the acquisition department, was it? What about diapers.com?
Right.
That was a whole other saga.
The Diapers.com story is often cited as an example of Amazon's willingness to engage in, shall we say, aggressive tactics.
Right.
They went head-to-head with Diapers.com on price slashing theirs so low that Diapers.com couldn't compete.
Cutthroat.
Yeah.
It's that relentless pursuit, that destroy or be destroyed mentality that really characterized Amazon's rise.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just competitors they battled with.
Right.
The Wusthof knives incident is a great example of how Amazon clashed with suppliers, too.
Ah, yes, the Wusthof affair.
Yeah.
Wusthof, this high-end knife maker, was furious when Amazon kept undercutting their minimum advertised price.
Right.
They tried to pull their products from the site. But
They needed Amazon more than Amazon needed them.
precisely.
Yeah.
It highlights the delicate balance of power in the Amazon ecosystem.
So we're talking about a company that's reshaped entire industries, from bookselling to cloud computing. They've got their hands in everything from groceries to healthcare.
Mhm.
And at the helm of it all is this enigmatic figure, Jeff Bezos. And that's what makes the Everything Store such a captivating read.
Yeah.
It's not just a business book, it's a character study. We see Bezos's ambition take shape, but we also see the toll it takes on him and those around him.
It's a reminder that even the most groundbreaking companies are built by people with all their flaws and complexities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes those flaws lead to some pretty spectacular missteps.
Right.
Remember the lube email incident?
Oh, yeah.
Talk about a PR disaster.
It's a classic example of how Amazon's data-driven approach,
Right.
while usually effective, can sometimes backfire.
Right.
They were so focused on targeting customers, on getting them to buy more,
Yeah.
that they lost sight of the human element.
Right.
In this case, it was an embarrassing product recommendation that went out to customers who probably weren't expecting it.
Oops. I'm guessing Bezos had some thoughts on that little snafu.
You bet.
Yeah.
Stone mentions this legendary one-word email that Bezos sent to the marketing team.
Okay. Wow.
Short, sweet, and to the point.
Classic Bezos.
Right.
But hey, even with the occasional misstep, there's no denying the scope of Amazon's impact.
They're not just selling us stuff.
Right.
They're shaping how we work,
Mm.
how we consume information,
Yeah.
even how we think about the future.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And that brings us back to Bezos's grand vision.
Okay.
It wasn't just about building a company. It
Right.
was about building something that would change the world.
The missionary, not a mercenary idea.
Yeah,
Exactly.
But there's a tension there, isn't there?
Right.
Because on the one hand, you have this relentless pursuit of efficiency, this almost ruthless focus on growth and market dominance.
Mhm.
But then there's this other side, this idealistic belief in using technology to make things better, to empower consumers.
Right.
How do you reconcile those two things?
It's a question that continues to spark debate.
Yeah.
Is Amazon a force for good, a driver of innovation and customer empowerment?
Right.
Or is it a behemoth, a monopoly that needs to be reined in for the sake of competition and consumer choice?
And maybe it's a bit of both. A classic tale of ambition innovation and the unintended consequences that come with disrupting entire industries.
What's remarkable is that even with all the scrutiny, all the criticism, Amazon continues to evolve.
Yeah.
They're pushing into new territories,
Mm-hmm.
from healthcare to entertainment, even space exploration with Blue Origin.
Speaking of Blue Origin, remember that detail about Bezos's biological father?
Oh, yeah?
It's like something out of a movie.
You mean how he had no idea who his son had become?
Yeah.
This world-famous entrepreneur building rockets and revolutionizing retail while his own father lived a quiet, ordinary life, completely unaware of the empire his son had built.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
It does.
What drives someone like Bezos?
Yeah.
Is it pure ambition, a desire to leave his mark on the world? Or is there something deeper, a need to prove himself, to fill a void that perhaps even he doesn't fully understand?
It's a question we can only speculate on,
Yeah.
but it speaks to the complexity of the human experience, even at the highest levels of success.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. From a garage in Seattle to the far reaches of the internet and beyond, what are you left with after this journey through the everything store?
For me, it's a reminder that the story of Amazon is still being written.
Yeah.
And as Bezos himself might say, it's still day one.
That's a great point to end on.
Yeah.
It's still day one for Amazon, for Bezos, and for all of us navigating this brave new world they've helped create.
Right.
If you're intrigued by the story we have uncovered today, we highly recommend checking out The Everything Store.
Absolutely.
It's a wild ride.
It is.
Until next time, happy reading.